I'm not the type to dramatize office politics. For most of my career, I believed the simple rule: if you do the work speaks. I kept my head down, hit deadlines, and made my manager look good without needing applause for it. That's why what happened in that executive meeting hit me so hard, not because it was loud, but because it was clean. Clean enough that if I reacted emotionally, I'd look unstable. If I stayed silent, I'd look invisible. And I knew she was counting on one of those outcomes. Her name was Dinah. VP level, polished, the kind of leader who could say great job, team, and make the room believe she personally lifted every box. She joined our division 6 months earlier, right after we missed a quarterly target, and the board started asking uncomfortable questions. I was a director of operations analytics, mid-level on paper, but in practice the person who kept the engine from stalling. Our business wasn't glamorous. We managed enterprise logistics for national retailers, inventory allocation, carrier performance, contract compliance, penalties, recoveries. The stuff executives only care about when it breaks and starts costing millions. 2 years earlier, I'd built a forecasting and recovery model that changed our entire playbook. It wasn't AI. It wasn't trendy. It was just ruthless accuracy. It flagged billing errors, predicted where service failures would trigger penalties, and, most importantly, turned messy operational noise into a clean dashboard the execs could understand. That dashboard became the source of truth. What nobody outside my team realized was that it was held together by relationships as much as spreadsheets, vendor contacts, carrier escalation paths, regional managers who trusted me enough to answer their phone at 7 a.m. I didn't just build a tool. I built a system people relied on, and because it worked, people stopped asking how it worked. That was the first mistake. The second mistake was assuming Dana was here to fix things. She wasn't. She was here to be seen fixing things. The first sign came during her first month. She'd schedule alignment meetings, then spend them talking over you while taking notes like she was harvesting your thoughts. She'd ask for summaries, then forward them upward without your name attached. She'd compliment you in private, then erase you in public. At first, I told myself I was being sensitive. Maybe this was just how executives operated. Maybe she needed time to trust her new team. Maybe she was under pressure and trying to create quick wins. Then the quarterly review came. Top floor, glass walls, 12 people. The entire leadership chain that could decide budgets, promotions, and who got blamed when numbers disappointed. I'd been preparing for a week, not because I wanted to impress anyone, because I knew the truth. Our division wasn't losing money because of market conditions. We were losing money because of something internal, something quiet, something expensive. Our top 3 carriers had been overbilling us for months on accessorial fees: fuel, detention, redelivery, appointment failures. Not always fraud, but not honest either. We'd missed it because the fees were buried in thousands of invoices, and our old process treated them as noise. My model didn't. It showed a pattern, and it showed leverage. If we pushed back with evidence, we could claw back 7 figures and renegotiate terms before Q4. That was the plan. I walked into the meeting with my laptop, my notes, and the calm confidence of someone who has proof, not opinions. Dana arrived last, of course. She didn't rush. She didn't look uncertain. She placed a leather folder on the table like she owned the air in the room. Then she nodded at me, just once, like a teacher acknowledging a student who'd done the homework. "All right," the CFO said. "Dana, you said you had an update on the cost recovery initiative." Dana smiled. "Yes, we've been working on a new approach to identify overbilling and performance leakage, and I'm happy to say we've already uncovered a substantial opportunity." My stomach tightened, not because she was presenting it, because she said we. She clicked the remote. My dashboard appeared on the screen, my formatting, my naming conventions, even the internal labels I use for carrier groups. She didn't change a thing. She just changed the voice. She spoke like it was her project, her strategy, her discovery. She explained my work in broad executive language, which would have been fine if she hadn't done one thing that turned the room against me without a single direct accusation. She glanced at me while the slide was up and said, "I want to emphasize how important it is that we stay aligned on the narrative here. There's been some over-detailing from the analytics side, but we're simplifying it." Over-detailing, analytics side, simplifying. It wasn't a compliment. It was a warning to the room. If I speak up, I'm the guy who complicates things. Then she went on. She pointed at the projected savings estimate. "Based on our analysis, we believe we can recover approximately $1.8 million over the next 2 quarters and prevent further leakage through revised compliance controls." I watched the CFO lean forward. I watched the COO nod. And I watched the head of sales smile for the first time in that entire meeting. My work was about to become a headline, and my name wasn't anywhere in the room. I tried to correct one small point, not even for credit, for accuracy, because she was about to promise a timeline that wasn't realistic without carrier cooperation. I said calmly, "The recoveries depend on response times. Carrier A has a 60-day dispute window, so we'll need—" She cut me off without looking at me. "Let's stay high level," she said, still smiling at the executives. "We'll handle the operational details offline." The CFO gave a thin nod like, "Fine, keep it moving." The CEO didn't react at all. And just like that, the moment passed. Dana finished the segment, accepted the praise, and moved us to the next topic. But I didn't take notes anymore. I just watched faces, because I realized something as I looked around that table. Nobody was confused. Nobody asked who built it. Nobody wondered why Dana had this dashboard if she'd joined 6 months ago. They didn't care. All they cared about was the number on the slide, and Dana knew that. After the meeting, people filed out in that quiet executive way. No emotion, just movement. Dana walked beside me in the hallway, heels clicking like a metronome. She kept her voice low, friendly. "Good job," she said like she'd thrown me a bone. That was solid material. I didn't answer immediately. I was still trying to decide if I'd just been disrespected or if I'd been strategically neutralized. Then she added, almost casually, "Send me your access to the underlying workbook. I want my team to own the reporting from here." "Own the reporting from here?" The words landed like a door closing, and I understood the real plan. She wasn't borrowing my work. She was taking my leverage. Because if she controlled the numbers, she controlled the story. And if she controlled the story, she controlled what happened to me. That night, I sat in my car in the parking garage for almost 20 minutes, engine off, staring at the concrete wall like it might explain what I was supposed to do next. I wasn't angry yet. Anger is loud. I was something else. I was awake. Because I could see the path clearly now. If I handed over everything, I'd be support. If I refused, I'd be difficult. And if I played it wrong, I'd be gone. But the part that kept replaying in my mind wasn't her cutting me off. It was the way the room accepted it, like I'd never been part of the conversation in the first place. And that's when I made the decision that would change the next 4 months of my life. I wasn't going to argue for respect. I was going to make the numbers speak in a way nobody could ignore. And I would do it with a trail so clean that even the executive team couldn't pretend they didn't see it. Because Dana thought this was about credit. She didn't understand it was about control. And the moment she tried to take mine, she gave me a reason to stop being loyal. But that was just the beginning. The next morning, Dana sent the email, not a phone call, not a quick, "Hey, can you swing by?" like a normal leader would do if she wanted partnership. An email, copied to 2 people I'd never worked with before, her new chief of staff and someone in strategic reporting. Subject line, transition of analytics ownership. That phrasing alone told me everything. Not collaboration, not coverage, not support. Ownership. Her email was polite in the way corporate knives are polite. Given the visibility of this initiative, I'd like to centralize the reporting deliverables under my org for consistency. Please provide access to the full model, underlying queries, and vendor escalation notes by EOD. Will ensure continuity. Continuity. As if I was the temporary risk. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, then opened my calendar, because I wanted to check something that still didn't sit right. Dana had joined 6 months ago, but she was acting like someone who'd been planning this for a while. I looked at the past weeks, the alignment meetings, the requests for summaries, the send me the workbook, the way she'd asked people individually for quick context, without ever inviting the full team. It wasn't chaotic, it was surgical. So I didn't answer her immediately. Instead, I did what I always do when something feels wrong. I pulled the data, not the carrier data, internal data. I opened our SharePoint access logs. I checked who had viewed the dashboard files, who had requested access, who had been added to distribution lists. And what I found made my jaw tighten. Dana wasn't asking for access because she didn't have it. She already had partial access through someone else. One of my own team members, a manager named Tyler, had added her to a folder weeks earlier. Not maliciously, probably flattered, probably told it was for visibility. But that meant Dana had been inside my work for weeks before that executive meeting. Long enough to rehearse it, long enough to learn the language, long enough to build a case that she owned it already. I walked over to Tyler's desk with my coffee still untouched. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Quick question. Did Dana ask you for access to the recovery folder?" Tyler looked up like a kid caught with a hand in the cookie jar. Yeah. She said she needed visibility because the CFO was asking. Did she say she wanted to take it over?" He swallowed. "She said she wanted to streamline it. You know how leadership is?" I nodded, not angry at Tyler. People like Dana rely on people like Tyler, good workers who assume everyone else is good too. I went back to my desk and replied to Dana, short, professional. "Happy to support. I can provide outputs and documentation. The model itself contains sensitive vendor contacts and dispute strategy notes, so I'll propose a controlled handoff process with legal procurement included to ensure we don't create compliance issues." It was true, and it was my first move. Because here's the thing about corporate theft. If you call it theft, you lose. But if you call it risk, legal risk, compliance risk, vendor risk, then executives start listening. Dana replied within 10 minutes. That alone made me smile, because it meant she was watching. "Understood. Let's not overcomplicate. Please share the model with my team today. We'll manage compliance." Overcomplicate. Same word she'd used in the meeting. She was building a narrative. I'm the difficult one. So I took a breath, opened my notes, and started listing what the model actually was. Because people who've never built something always assume it's a file you can transfer. The model pulled from carrier invoice feeds, EDI plus PDFs, our internal ticketing system, a set of SQL queries tied to my credentials, manual exception tags based on relationship knowledge, and a dispute playbook I'd built with procurement over 2 years. If Dana's team owned it, one of two things would happen. They'd break it and blame me. They'd run it badly and make promises we couldn't keep. Either way, I'd be positioned as the problem. So I did the second thing I always do when something feels wrong. I documented everything. Not in a dramatic way, quietly. I wrote a memo for myself. Dates, meetings, the executive presentation, her request, my response. Then I started saving versions, not to sabotage, to protect reality. By Wednesday, Dana escalated. She walked past my desk without saying hi and dropped a printed sheet onto my keyboard like it was an invoice. "Need this today," she said. It was an org chart. My name was circled, and then crossed out with a pen. Underneath it, Dana had written, "Move reporting under strategic reporting, effective immediately." I looked up at her. "Effective immediately?" She nodded like this was normal. "Leadership wants a single point of accountability," she said. "And frankly, you've been resistant." resistant. There it was. She was already labeling me. I kept my expression flat. If leadership wants accountability, we should clarify the operational dependencies first. Dana leaned in, voice soft. This is not a debate, she said. Your job is to support. My job is to present. She walked away, and for a minute I sat there with my hands on the desk, feeling something I hadn't felt at work in a long time. Not fear, insult. Because I'd stayed late, fixed issues no one saw, answered calls on weekends, held vendor relationships together when our contracts were falling apart. And now my job was to be the guy in the shadows while she took the stage. That night, I didn't work late. I went home at a normal time and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, not looking at spreadsheets, looking at people. Because Dana wasn't the whole problem. Dana was just the face. The real problem was that executives loved clean stories, and Dana was selling them one. New VP arrives, finds leakage, fixes it, saves millions. It didn't matter who built the engine as long as someone held the steering wheel in the meeting. But here's what Dana didn't know. The numbers she was presenting weren't just numbers. They were promises. And promises in enterprise logistics are connected to contracts, disputes, and relationships. If she mishandled one carrier conversation, we could lose a negotiation. If she pushed too hard without evidence, we could get cut off. If she overpromised savings to the CFO and didn't deliver, someone would have to take the fall, and Dana wasn't the kind of person who falls alone. So that night, I did something I'd never done before. I opened a folder on my desktop and named it Receipts. Inside, I put the original versions of the model. The emails requesting transfer meeting invites the dashboard revision history and a simple timeline. Not because I planned to expose her, because I realized I was in a situation where truth needed structure to survive. Then I took one last look at Dana's email. Provide access by EOD. And I typed a reply I knew would change how she treated me going forward. I can't transfer full ownership without a formal change request and updated role-based access approvals. If you'd like, I'll schedule a review with IT security and procurement tomorrow morning. A polite wall, a realistic wall, a wall built out of process. And within 5 minutes, my phone rang. It was HR. And that's when I knew Dana had stopped trying to take my work quietly. She was going to take me out of the equation, and then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. HR didn't call me by accident. They never do. When I picked up, the woman on the line introduced herself as Marissa from Employee Relations, and her tone was warm in that practiced way that makes your stomach tighten before she says anything meaningful. You have a few minutes to chat? She asked. I looked at my calendar. Nothing urgent, no meetings for another hour. Sure, I said. What's this about? A pause, just long enough to let me feel the shift. We've received the feedback that there have been some challenges with collaboration and responsiveness, she said. I wanted to understand your perspective. Collaboration, responsiveness. Words that sound harmless until you realize they're the same words used to justify removing someone without ever saying performance. I'm not naive. I've been in enough corporate rooms to know how these stories get written. You don't fire the person who built the system. You fire the person who can't work well with others. Can you tell me who provided that feedback? I asked. Another pause, this one shorter. I can't disclose that, she said. But the concern is that there's been resistance to leadership direction. Resistance. Dana had used that word to my face. I kept my voice even. If this is about the analytics model transfer, I'm not refusing. I'm asking for a formal process. It contains vendor contacts and dispute strategy. That touches procurement and legal. Marissa made a small, acknowledging sound like she was taking notes. Understood, she said. Dana shared that you've been slow to support a critical initiative, and that it's created risk for executive reporting. There it was. Not, he's wrong. He's a risk. And once you're framed as a risk, anything you do to protect the company becomes Obstruction. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the office wall as people walked past my glass door, laughing about something unrelated. It felt surreal, like watching a normal day from inside a different reality. "I'd like this documented," I said. Marissa didn't sound surprised. "Of course. I'll send a summary of our discussion." "Good," I said. "And I want to be clear. I'm willing to support leadership. I'm also responsible for compliance and accuracy. If someone wants a controlled handoff with the right approvals, I can do it. If someone wants a file dump with no safeguards, I can't." Marissa's tone softened again. "I appreciate you clarifying," she said. "We're just trying to ensure alignment." Alignment. I ended the call, and for the first time since Dana arrived, I felt something crack inside me. Not fear. A kind of grief. Because I realized something I'd spent years avoiding. This company wasn't built on fairness. It was built on narratives. And Dana was better at narrative than I was. I wasn't losing because I lacked competence. I was losing because I assumed competence was the whole game. That afternoon, Dana called me into a small conference room, one of those windowless ones meant for private conversations. Her chief of staff was there too, laptop open, already typed into a notes doc. Dana didn't sit across from me. She sat slightly to the side, like we weren't equals in the conversation. "HR mentioned you're concerned about process," she said, calm as ever. "I want to reset. This initiative has visibility. I need you to be a partner." Partner, that word again used like bait. "I've been a partner," I said. "I'm willing to do the handoff, with procurement and IT in the loop." Dana smiled without warmth. "Here's the problem," she said. "You're treating this like your personal asset. It's not." I held eye contact. "I'm treating it like a company asset, which is why I'm not giving unrestricted access to vendor escalation notes and dispute leverage without approvals." Her chief of staff typed faster. Dana leaned back. "Do you understand how this is being perceived?" "I understand how you're framing it," I said. The smile faded. Dana's voice lowered. "Careful." Not a shout. Not anger. A warning. And in that moment, the room felt smaller. I looked at the chief of staff's laptop and saw the phrases being written in real time. Not aligned, gatekeeping. Resistance to directive. Single point of failure. Single point of failure. That one hit like a punch, because it wasn't wrong in a technical sense. The model did depend on me, my credentials, my relationships, my judgment calls. But instead of seeing that as something to respect and institutionalize, they were using it as a weapon. They weren't trying to transfer knowledge. They were trying to remove me so they could claim the knowledge without me attached to it. I left that room with my pulse steady, but my mind racing. And that's when I made the mistake of thinking I was still playing defense. I wasn't. Dana wasn't just taking my work. She was creating a file on me, a file designed to justify whatever came next. So I stopped assuming good faith, and I started preparing like someone who understood the actual battlefield. That night, I called someone I trusted in procurement. Ellen, a senior manager I'd worked with for years. She wasn't my friend exactly. She was something better, a professional who cared about reality. I didn't tell her everything. I didn't say Dana is stealing. I said something that would make sense in her world. "Ellen," I said, "I need your advice on a risk issue. Leadership wants to centralize dispute reporting, and I'm worried they're going to promise recoveries without understanding carrier windows and escalation protocols." Ellen didn't hesitate. "Who's centralizing it?" she asked. "Dana's org," I said. "A beat." "Then, that's not ideal." That reaction told me Ellen already knew what kind of person Dana was. Ellen continued, "If they're going to own dispute strategy, procurement needs to sign off. Otherwise, you get inconsistent messaging to carriers. That becomes a contract issue." "Can you put that in writing?" I asked. Ellen sighed. "I can send a note. Neutral. But yes." Neutral was perfect. I wasn't building drama. I was building a paper trail that made my position the reasonable one. The next morning, Ellen sent an email, copied to me, Dana, and our legal liaison. Short. Professional. unemotional. It said essentially, dispute strategy must be coordinated through procurement. Vendor escalations require controlled access. Any reporting transition should include a formal handoff process. Dana responded within minutes. Thanks, Ellen. We'll handle that internally. Handle that internally, meaning ignore it. But now it wasn't just me raising concerns. It was procurement. And legal was copied. Dana hated that. I could feel it. Because 2 hours later, I got another invite. From Dana. Subject line. Performance alignment check-in. Not handoff. Not transition. Not initiative review. Performance. The meeting had HR on it, and my boss's boss. The kind of lineup that means a decision has already been discussed. I sat there staring at the invite, and for the first time I understood the real shape of the trap. If I handed over the model, Dana would take credit and then cut me loose as no longer needed. If I didn't hand it over, Dana would fire me for insubordination and take it anyway. Either way, she expected me to lose, unless I did something I'd avoided my entire career. Stop trying to be right and start being undeniable. That night, I didn't sleep much. I didn't pace or panic. I planned. I reviewed every executive presentation she'd done, every number she'd quoted, every promise she'd made, and I found the one thing she was using that she didn't fully understand. A metric that looked simple on a slide, but could destroy her credibility if it was shown correctly. Because Dana wasn't just taking my work. She was about to walk into the next executive meeting with numbers that were technically accurate and strategically lethal. And when those numbers spoke in the wrong room to the wrong people, they wouldn't come for the dashboard. They'd come for the person who presented it. They thought I was a liability. But I realized something in the quiet around 2 a.m., staring at my screen. I wasn't the liability, I was the control. And if I moved carefully, the numbers would tell the truth for me. The performance alignment check-in wasn't a conversation, it was a script. HR was there. My boss's boss, Greg, was there. Dana sat with her hands folded like she was attending a budget review, not aiming a knife. Marissa from HR started with the same soft voice. We want to address concerns around responsiveness, collaboration, and alignment with leadership direction. Greg didn't look at me. He looked at Dana. Dana didn't accuse me of stealing or lying or anything dramatic. She didn't need to. She just described me like a problem that needed a solution. He's brilliant, she said, but he makes everything dependent on him. He withholds access. He slows down decision-making. At this level, we can't have single points of failure. I could hear the keywords stacking up like bricks. So I didn't defend my ego. I defended facts. I haven't withheld access, I said. I asked for a formal handoff with procurement and IT security, because the model contains vendor escalation notes and dispute strategy. Procurement already put that in writing. I slid a printed copy of Ellen's email across the table. Neutral, professional, hard to argue with. Dana didn't even glance down. We'll coordinate, she said. That's not the issue. Greg finally looked at me. Then what is the issue? I kept my voice calm. The issue is accuracy and accountability. Dana presented projected recoveries to the executive team. Those projections depend on dispute windows, evidence thresholds, and how we communicate with carriers. If we rush this and the story breaks, the company eats the risk. Dana smiled slightly. That's exactly what I mean. He catastrophizes. He turns a simple reporting transition into a compliance opera. Marissa wrote something down. I watched her pen move and realized the only way to survive this was to make every sentence clean. Please document, I said, looking at HR, that I'm willing to support the transition through a controlled process, and that my concern is vendor compliance and accuracy. Greg cleared his throat, impatient. Fine. What do you need? 2 things, I said. A change request that reassigns system credentials appropriately, and a transition timeline that includes procurement review. In the meantime, I'll deliver outputs on schedule. Dana's eyes narrowed just a fraction. After the meeting, I sent an email recap within 10 minutes. I listed what we agreed, what was requested, and what I would deliver. No emotion, no accusations, just a record. Then I did the one thing Dana didn't expect. I stopped trying to keep her from taking control. I let her. Because I'd realized something the night before. Dana didn't want ownership. She wanted the stage. So I gave her a stage with one condition. Everything she touched had to be traceable. That week, I delivered the outputs in a lockdown format. A read-only dashboard, an appendix of assumptions, and a dispute timeline that showed exactly which savings were realized, which were pending, and which were at risk based on contract windows. Dana ignored the appendix. Of course she did. She took the top-line number, rewrote the slide titles, and scheduled a follow-up executive review. This time with the board liaison on the invite. And that's where the chaos started. It began with the carrier A, the one with the strict dispute window. Dana's team sent them a formal recovery notice, using language procurement would never approve. Aggressive, vague, packed with claims that weren't supported by the invoice-level evidence yet. Carrier A didn't argue. They did something worse. They escalated. Within 48 hours, our legal liaison forwarded an email thread marked urgent. Carrier A's counsel was claiming we were violating the dispute process outlined in the MSA and threatening to suspend favorable rate terms until the abusive dispute behavior was resolved. That wasn't a theoretical risk anymore. That was money. Immediate money. I forwarded it to Ellen in procurement. She replied with one sentence. Who authorized this language? I didn't answer her directly. I didn't have to. Because 10 minutes later, Dana walked into my office without knocking. Did you tell procurement I sent that? She asked, voice controlled. I didn't tell them anything, I said. They're copied on the thread. They can read. Dana leaned closer. You're undermining executive initiatives. No, I said. Your team sent a legal notice without procurement sign-off. That's not an initiative. That's a violation of process. Her eyes held mine. Fix it. I can help fix it, I said, but I can't unsend it. That was the first time her composure slipped. Not anger. Something like panic. Quickly buried. She left, and 30 minutes later, I got another call. Not HR, CFO's office, his assistant. He needs the backup for Dana's recovery number. Today. The backup. I almost laughed because I knew exactly why he was asking. Dana's number had become a promise, and now a carrier's lawyer was making that promise dangerous. I sent the CFO a clean package, invoice samples, dispute window rules, and a reconciliation sheet showing the difference between identified leakage and recoverable dollars. I included one simple sentence. Projected savings are contingent on dispute acceptance and contract timelines. Overstating realized recoveries creates reporting risk. I didn't know it yet, but that email changed the room before I ever stepped into it. The executive review happened Friday afternoon. I wasn't invited to present. I was invited to support. I sat against the wall with my laptop open like a quiet technician. Dana stood at the screen, confident again, and clicked through her deck with the same smooth cadence. We're ahead of schedule, she said. We've already secured significant recoveries. The CFO interrupted, not harshly, just directly. How much of that is realized cash recovery versus identified dispute opportunity? Dana blinked once. It's all part of the recovery pipeline. That's not what I asked, the CFO said. The COO leaned forward. The CEO finally looked up. Dana's smile tightened. We're tracking it as recoverable value. The CFO turned his head slightly, toward me, without fully looking at me. Do we have the reconciliation? I stood up. Yes. Dana's face went still. I plugged in, opened my document, and put a single table on the screen. 3 columns, nothing dramatic. Identified leakage, submitted disputes within window. Realized recoveries approved and paid. The difference between Dana's headline number and actual realized recoveries wasn't small. It wasn't fatal, but it was enough to destroy trust if the board believed she'd been inflating results. The room went quiet in a way that felt physical. Dana spoke quickly. Those realized numbers are lagging indicators. We're managing the narrative. The CEO cut in calm and cold. We don't manage narratives. We manage risk. Then legal asked the question that ends careers. Who approved the carrier notice that triggered counsel escalation? Dana opened her mouth, then closed it. She glanced at me like I was supposed to rescue her. I didn't. I just said, evenly, the notice came from Strategic Reporting's mailbox. Procurement wasn't included before it went out. Dana tried to pivot. He's the one who controls the model. We're dependent on... The CFO held up a hand. Stop. We asked for a transition plan, not a public blame exchange. Dana's throat moved as she swallowed, and for the first time since she arrived, she wasn't in control of the story. When the meeting ended, nobody spoke to Dana on the way out, but the CFO stopped near me. Send me the access logs and version history, he said quietly. All of it. I nodded. Already organized. That night, as I emailed the package, my hands didn't shake. Not because I felt victorious, because I felt something sharper than anger. Clarity. Dana hadn't just tried to race me. She'd tried to replace reality with a performance. And now reality was walking back into the building, with legal and finance on either side of it. On Monday morning, my calendar filled with a new invite. Subject line, Executive Review, Controlled Transition and Accountability. Attendees, CFO, Legal, Procurement, and the CEO. Dana was on it too, but this time she wasn't listed as the owner. She was listed as required. And I knew Part 5 wouldn't be about proving I was right. It would be about deciding what to do when the company finally admitted who actually controlled the numbers. Monday morning felt different the moment I walked in. Not because anyone was suddenly nice to me, because people were careful. The kind of careful you see right before a reorg or an internal investigation. Voices lower, doors closed, Slack messages shorter, eye contact avoided in the hallways. At 9 a.m., I joined the Executive Review, Controlled Transition and Accountability call. CFO, Legal, Procurement, the CEO. Dana listed as required, and me finally listed as presenter. No fanfare, just a quiet correction of reality. The CFO started the call with a sentence that told me the situation was already past the point of saving face. We need to understand two things, he said. 1, what happened with Carrier A. 2, why we didn't have clean definitions of realized versus projected recoveries before the board-facing update. He didn't say Dana's name. He didn't have to. Legal went next. We have a documented escalation from Carrier A's counsel. We also have a review requirement now. Any dispute communications that could be interpreted as formal notice must route through procurement and legal. Ellen from procurement spoke right after, steady and blunt. I raised this risk in writing before the notice went out. Then the CEO spoke, quiet, controlled. Dana, he said, walk us through your decision-making. Dana's camera was on. Her posture was perfect. Her voice was calm. But the calm sounded practiced. We moved quickly, she said. We had a mandate to centralize reporting and accelerate recovery. We acted in good faith and... The CFO cut in. That's not a walkthrough. Who drafted the notice? Who approved it? And why was procurement excluded? Dana hesitated just long enough to give the room an answer without words. She tried to pivot again, one last time. This all stems from a dependency problem, she said. We're overly reliant on one individual for access and interpretation. That's what I've been trying to solve. I didn't react. I didn't need to, because the CEO turned slightly toward legal. Do we have the access log package? He asked. Legal replied, yes. It shows Dana had access to the reporting folder weeks before the executive presentation. It also shows edits were made to slide language after the CFO requested clarification. Dana's expression didn't change, but her eyes did, like she was calculating exits. The CFO said, "So you had access. You had visibility, but you didn't ensure governance." Dana began to answer. The CEO raised a hand. Not dramatic, just final. "Stop," he said. Silence. Then he addressed me. "Can you explain clearly what the model is, who it depends on, and how we remove single points of failure without compromising vendor compliance?" That question was the moment I'd been building toward for months. Not revenge, recognition of reality. I shared my screen and kept it simple. What the model ingested. What required credentialed access. What required relationship-based escalation. What was automated. What was judgment. Where compliance risk existed. And what a controlled transition would actually look like. Then I said one sentence I'd rehearsed the night Dana first erased me in that glass room. This can be institutionalized, but it can't be stolen. Nobody reacted, because nobody could argue with it. I proposed a transition plan that sounded like something executives could approve without feeling embarrassed. Governance, procurement, plus legal sign-off on any formal recovery notices. Access, IT reassigned service accounts away from personal credentials. Continuity, 2 analysts trained with documented workflows and exception logic. Reporting integrity, a strict separation of identified leakage, submitted disputes, and realized recoveries in all executive materials. Accountability, a single owner for reporting, but with cross-functional approval gates. The CFO nodded slowly. "This is what we should have had before." Then he said the words Dana had tried to weaponize against me. "We're not removing a single point of failure by removing the person who understands the system. We remove it by transferring knowledge correctly." Dana's jaw tightened, a fraction, but I saw it. The CEO leaned back and looked at her. "Dana," he said, "effective today, you're no longer leading the recovery initiative." Dana opened her mouth, then closed it. He continued, still calm. "You will transition your reporting function back to operations analytics under finance oversight. HR will follow up with you regarding leadership conduct and governance breaches." Leadership conduct, governance breaches. He wasn't firing her on the call, but he was marking her, and in corporate terms, that mark doesn't wash off. Dana tried one last thing, voice softer now. "So what happens to my role?" The CFO answered, not unkindly. "That depends on what HR and legal conclude." Dana's camera stayed on, but her face had the stillness of someone who knows the story has moved on without her. After the call ended, my inbox filled with calendar invites, not threats, real meetings, IT security to create service accounts, procurement to build templates, finance to align definitions for realized cash, and then an email from Greg, my boss's boss, the one who'd sat in that HR meeting and let Dana label me resistant. Subject line, reset. One line inside, "Let's meet today. I owe you a conversation." I didn't feel satisfaction reading it. I felt something quieter. Relief. We met at 2 p.m. Greg looked tired, like someone who'd spent the weekend realizing he backed the wrong narrative. He didn't apologize in a dramatic way. He did it the way executives do when they're trying to preserve their own integrity. "I misread the situation," he said. "I let urgency override judgment. I shouldn't have allowed your work to be presented without proper attribution and governance." Attribution. He said it out loud. Then he added, "Finance is recommending a retention adjustment for you, and the CEO wants your title expanded. Director is not accurate anymore." There are moments where you can choose to be petty. I didn't. I chose to be precise. "I'm not interested in revenge," I said. "I'm interested in making sure this can't happen again. To me, or to anyone who builds something valuable." Greg nodded slowly. "Fair." That week, the recovery initiative became a formal program. Cross-functional, documented, governed. I led it under finance oversight. 2 analysts were assigned to me officially. Service accounts were created. Exception logic was documented. Dispute communication templates were approved by procurement and legal. And the numbers, real numbers, started coming in, not pipeline, cash. The first realized recoveries hit the ledger in Q4. Not $1.8 million overnight like Dana had implied, but enough to be undeniable. Enough that the CFO used my reconciliation table in the board deck with a new header. Realized recoveries. Verified. I wasn't in the room when Dana's HR process concluded. I only heard the outcome the way you hear most outcomes in corporate life, through silence. She stopped appearing on invites. Her chief of staff transferred. Strategic reporting was quietly restructured under finance. And one afternoon, 3 weeks later, I saw Dana in the lobby with a small box. No speech, no drama. Just a person leaving a building that no longer needed her performance. She glanced at me as she passed. For a second, I thought she might say something. She didn't, because there was nothing left to argue. The numbers had spoken. And when the numbers speak loud enough, even the executive team can't pretend they didn't hear them. That night, I went home at a normal hour, sat down at my kitchen table, and ate dinner without my laptop open for the first time in months. Not because I won, because I got back something I didn't realize I'd lost, my name attached to my work, my leverage protected by process, and the quiet confidence of knowing that if someone ever tries to erase me again, I won't need to shout. I'll let the numbers do it. Ooh.